Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks exciting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. Oh, and just one more thing before we go. Please consider like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. But now with all that out of the way, let's carry on with the video. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to have to do a little bit of prep work before we actually start painting up the miniature. As you can see, I've already applied some texture to the base, and its arm on the miniature, when I brought it, was already detached from the miniature. And I thought, rather than actually attaching it, I'm going to make it as an added bit of visual interest to the piece by making it so the stone golem's arm is already broken off and he's getting mad and angry and running at you like it's sort of a defense mechanism, and just giving him a little bit more personality, since it is a reasonably boring miniature to paint up with very limited amount of color palette. So we're just going to be applying this to the base and make it look like he has a bit of a story to him. Then once we have the piece attached to the base, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding in a little bit more added texture to the actual miniature itself, rather than the actual base. So I've come in here with some agrellan earth, which is a crackle paste. So when you apply it, it creates these nice cracks in the actual piece, and I'm going to make it, especially over the area where the arm has fallen off, so we got that nice bit of drama to the piece, and we want to be applying it all over in other places as well, giving it that visual interest, because we want to really, since I'm going with this painting challenge here, and we're only going to be using dry brushing to be painting this miniature, I want to add in a little bit of extra elements, and adding the agrellan earth and the texture to the base and having that arm come off is going to really help tell a story to the actual piece as well, as since we're going to be using a very simple technique to be painting up this miniature, so I wanted to add in a little bit more detail to the piece. Then now we've got that agrellan earth all set and where we want it, we're going to be placing some earth texture by Vallejo as well, and of course we're going to be just stippling this on in some random places to of course add into that stone texture. I want it to be, the story I'm trying to tell here with this miniature is he's been long forgotten and he's been reactivated and come to life, so I want to try and tell that visual story, and this is going to help tell this in nice and subtle ways. So having the arm fall off, for example, having these nice cracks when that agrellan earth is fully set, it's going to have some nice cracks up the actual stone working, and adding these bits on here like we've got some other bits of growths and wasn't quite carved right in the making process. So just these little things to add into the story element of the piece. And then once we have that done, as you can see, I've primed it in black to start off with. I wanted to, since we're only using dry brushing to be painting up this piece, I didn't want to add in any necessary steps. You could, of course, dry brush the whole thing black, but it would have been an annoying amount of waste of time. So I've just spray painted it in black to really get the effect that I want to have with our stone golem here. And as you can see, I use some stonewall grey to start off the piece. It's a nice sort of neutral grey with an interesting tone to it, and we're going to be using that as a base colour of our piece. And as all these steps are going to be, it's just going to be dry brushing a lot. And you can see I've got a nice big dry brush. I want nice big sweeping edges, but I'm also just dry brushing straight down with any of these colours that I'm using here. So uniform grey is going to be our second layer of greys that we're going to be using here, because of course he's a stone golem, so I'm going to be using lots of greys. And as you can see, when I'm dry brushing, I'm focusing more on the downstroke of the dry brush rather than the up, especially on the main body of the piece, because I want that black to be the absolute darkest shadows of the piece. And that's why I primed it in black rather than in using the ordinary base grey that it has. It's going to help us save in the steps while painting up this miniature with just dry brushing techniques. And again, what we're going to be doing is coming in with a lighter grey. This is dark sea grey, and we're just again applying it as we're going up and up in colours too. I'm also using the dry brush a lot lighter than the previous layer as well. Maybe a little bit hard to tell because I'm just shaking the brush back and forward, but I'm only applying it sparingly each time, and as I'm doing it, progressively getting less and less of the actual dry brushing and hitting those higher points. And coming in with our final colour for our stone golem at the moment, and that is going to be ivory, and that is going to be used for the highest highlights. So you can see I've got it a lot lighter on my brush, and I'm being a lot more selective where I'm placing this highlight than the previous one, each one I've been getting progressively less and less in the areas I wanted. This one I'm being a little bit more focused. Even though I'm using a big wide dry brush to do this, I'm still being pretty focused, really trying to hit those top points, the hard angles that are carved into the stone, really trying to focus it as much as I can. I know it can be a little bit difficult with a big wide dry brush like this, but it'll hopefully eventually work out in the end, because we'll be coming back in a little bit later for more focused highlights anyway. And this is the part where I make a little bit of an oopsie, where I use some rhinox hide here, and I just paint it onto the base. Now, it wasn't until after I completed this step and waited for it to dry that I noticed I was doing a lot of dry brushing, and I was going to have to do some dry brushing again for the base, and decided to turn it into a challenge for myself, and thought, what if I just dry brush the entirety of the miniature with everything? But unfortunately, I'd already painted this base up, so you can obviously just easily leave this step out, come in with a smaller dry brush and dry brush over top of it. It would make absolutely no difference. But it was after this point that I decided, no, I'm going to make a challenge for myself, and decide to just dry brush an entire miniature. And can you paint a miniature with just using dry brushing techniques? And then with my big revelation of the video, discovered we're going to come back into some dry brushing again, and using mahogany brown, which is our nice sort of reddish brown tone, adding in a lot more visual interest to the piece. And as you can see here, I switched to a smaller dry brush to achieve this effect, which is exactly what I would have done if I had to come up with the challenge for myself from the very start. But it wasn't until I was doing this part here that I thought, there's a lot of dry brushing, and it's going to be a pretty boring video with me doing this, so that's why I decided to turn it into a personal challenge to myself. And can I paint an entire miniature with just dry brushing? But we had that little mistake there just beforehand, but we won't talk about that too much. And for the last step as well, with our base ground, we're coming in with some leather brown to be the highest highlights, and those absolute parts that are sticking out in the sun that's coming down from the miniature as well. And of course, as you can see, we're using that small dry brush around to get around those areas as well. Okay, now with the ground complete and the stone golem himself complete, we're going to come in with two washes, agrax earthshade and athonian camoshade. So a brown and a green wash, if you don't have these exact ones. And I'm going to be mix and matching them as I'm going along this piece, because I want the green wash to represent sort of like moss and mold and stuff growing in between the cracks and the crevices on this piece. So I'm going back and forth between the brown and the green wash all over the miniature. So it's completely random. I can't say exactly where to do this. It's just where you want it to be on these pieces. If you're copying me, then you can see roughly where I'm doing each individual pieces. But also too, I'm mainly focusing pretty much just the brown wash straight on the ground. I'm using the athonian camoshade for the actual miniature itself, because I'm not going to worry too much about having the green wash on the ground. I just want to be focusing it on the actual miniature itself. And then once we have that dried, we're going to come back in with our ivory, which was our highest highlight again, and we're going to be, of course, placing it on to those high raised points. At this time, you can see I'm now using a more controlled, smaller dry brush for this step, and really focusing in on those hard edges and those very high raised points on the miniature, like I was talking about before when we were doing the ivory in the last time. And you can see that brown and green effect is really giving it that sort of real aged golem look, like he's been lost in some sort of jungle temple or something like that. So hopefully I'm coming across with that effect I want. You can definitely see with all those texture paste and stuff on there, we've got a lot of areas that are really bringing out that dry brushing really well. And at that point, you could call the miniature completely done. But I'm going to come in here with a little bit more added effect. I want a bit more pop to this miniature. It's very plain and boring if you're doing this ordinarily. That's why I decided to put the challenge on here. And I wanted to add in some extra elements. So I'm coming in with a metallic color. Metallic color of your choice. I'm using brassy brass here. I want these nice brass fittings. And I'm going around and just dry brushing them on there. As you can see, it's very tricky to do. I've got an even smaller makeup brush here as my dry brush. And I'm just very carefully but selectively trying to get it onto those areas. I'm not worrying too much if I get it anywhere else. It's not going to look too bad from a distance, because those metallic areas are only going to be very small to see on the accidental overbrush areas. But since I've got a nice small dry brush, it's pretty controlled as if you were ordinarily painting. So don't worry about it too much if you're doing this step as well. And then I also thought that wasn't enough, and I wanted to do one more step that I've never tried before. I've never really even seen it done in this sort of technique way on videos on YouTube or anywhere else on the internet either. I'm sure it has been done, but there's no way it hasn't been done before. I want to add in a sort of light OSL effect to the actual piece, and I'm starting off with using this like a gem slash, well, I guess I'm more painting it as a gem at this point, but this sort of medallion area on the actual stone golem itself. And as you can see, I'm using red here and just dry brushing around and around and around. It's pretty much painting that area, but you will still see some areas underneath. And I'm slowly going to be going around further and further and just out where I would think the areas would naturally catch those places. I'm still very new. I've never done any OSL effect or anything like this before, and I thought, why not try it when I'm already trying to do another challenge to myself, which is just trying to paint a miniature up with just dry brushing. So I hope this is useful for you guys and see, hey, I could give this a try as well. You can seem to get that same effect with some dry brushing. And as I'm going, I'm just progressively adding lighter and lighter colors to it. Eventually get to a pure red with some ivory on there to really hit in to the highest high points and sort of that center glowing of the chest, because I want him to look like he's just activated after years and years of being deactivated, and he's crumpled and fallen apart and he's coming running at you. That's the story I'm trying to tell with this piece anyway. And then once you've done that, it's totally up to you if you want to go this far or not, but you can do that, and then it's just a matter of doing the basing. You can do the basing however you want, and you know the story that I'm trying to tell, so can't wait for you to check out the pictures in the end and see if I achieved the effect I was going for. And with all that completed, I have finally finished the challenge to myself of seeing if I can paint a miniature using only dry brushing and dry brushing techniques. So I hope this has been interesting for you guys to see that you can, if you want to yourself, also paint up a miniature using only dry brushing. So I can't believe how well it turned out, and I think my story came across with the miniature and the piece that I was trying to tell as well. But let me know, guys, if this is something you'd like to see me do, doing some more painting challenges and some weird and different styles. Maybe even give me some suggestions down, and I'll see if I can eventually get to them when I've got some time and I've got miniatures that would help with those ideas. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.